So for how many of you, just by show of hands, is this your first time locked in a room with me? You're my little puppies now, you poor people. Second time? It's like potato chips, you can't eat just one. All right. So interestingly, as fun as the opening of our session is and was, there's a lot of power for your clients in what we just did. The handout you have, if you don't have one, I have a few left. This is a segment of one of my manuals. Yes. I have. Yep. And for those of you who don't have one or weren't here when I passed them out, oops, the vertigo's kicking in. I gotta get more drugs. That's it, baby. Anybody else before Joni? Okay. Here you go. All right. The diagram, which I'm waiting for the projector to come up, but the diagram on the cover, you'll see it throughout the handout, is my conceptualization of energetic psychology, where the body bone meets the head bone and beyond. And the reason it's like that, it's designed like a DVD. The outer section, the red line, indicates, if you think of memories, any type of subjective experience, memories, traumas, fantasies, daydreams, belief systems, all of them are imprinted on a rewritable DVD. That DVD, the substance of which we would call energy. I don't like that word all that much. And the reason is because it's really vague. I often have a dim view of energy healing, even though I have more energy healing credentials than McDonald's sells hamburgers. I really do. I often take a dim view about people start talking about energy because energy can mean anything. It's like saying exercise, right? And so how do you work with that? Well, if you look at most ways that we work with energy, there's two components to energy that we can work directly with. One is called quality scale. The other is called quantity scale. You can only calibrate energy by the effect it produces, or by measuring how much of that effect is present. So the French radiesthesists, if anybody's familiar with radiesthesiology or radiesthesia, they divided energetics into a quality scale and a quantity scale. And so a lot of their practices were about measuring the different qualities. Now, qualities are where we can start to play, because if you can name it and describe it, you can generate a body feeling and you can manipulate it. In fact, feeling, one of the reasons for the song, is because in spite of what NLP wants to convince you of, that people are auditories and visuals and kinesthetics and olfactories and gustatories and yada, 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 you are not. Everything human beings do is in response to a feeling. It's either a feeling they want more of or a feeling they want a whole lot less of. All their behaviors, all their belief systems result or are stimulated by a feeling. Does that make sense? Now, how does that relate to energy? When we start talking about energetics, assuming, of course, now that we're all talking about the same thing, a certain amount of vibrational substance that has certain qualities connected to it, which is analogous to the feeling, by the way. How many people here are familiar with a discipline known as cymatics? Okay, if you haven't, go to YouTube, type in cymatics video. There's a really cool music video where if you pass, like if a stream of water is playing next to a drum and you beat the drum, the water will literally spiral because the frequency changes the geometry. Wasn't that just like a sound becoming a shape? But what are we doing? We don't see the energy, we see the quality it expresses. Does that make sense? Now, if you've been studying energetics and hermetics as long as I have, you've heard of this thing called the law of correspondence. True? Yes? All right. This means, by the way, before I get any further, if politically incorrect language, colorful metaphors, swearing, or the word boobies offend you, There's a door. Right? If this is the scope of everything there is to talk about, in just these little bullet points I've given you here, we have time for this. So I know I'm talking fast because I want to take you as far as I can and give you some experiences that you can take back and apply clinically. Okay? So I will take you as far as I can in the time we have, and I will point you in the direction of where to go next to level up. Is that a fair trade? Okay. I love questions. I really do. Probably more so than probably anybody else. But the more questions I get, the more squirrels I chase, which can be frustrating for people who are very linear. That's not me, by the way. So I enjoy it. But let's just distill all this energetic stuff down to one thing that we can track and measure and work with in the body. And when I mean body, I don't just mean the physical one. We're going to build from most of us, when we work in metaphysics, we try to work from spirit down. And we get lost somewhere in the ozone. But if we start from the meat and work out and up, everything starts to fit. So one of the keys I want to give you is if you want to understand the laws of metaphysics, study the laws of physics. As above, so below. But we're always so focused on studying the above, we don't pay attention to the below because we think it's less than. No, it's your biggest teacher. Okay? This whole DVD thing that we're talking about. When you talk about feelings in the body, what you're actually referring to from an energetic perspective is a specific frequency or set of frequencies. Every time those frequencies change, the body feelings connected with it change. All right? Now this is monitored by a part of your neurology known as your interoceptive nervous system. Your interoceptive nervous system is the part of you that predicts what's going to happen next and doesn't tell you. Right? How many have ever heard of a book called, or a theory called the theory of constructed emotions? Anybody? Theory of constructed emotions. If not, there's a book called How Emotions Are Made by Dr. Lisa Barrett. I highly, highly recommend that you pick it up. Okay? Because the first thing that happens is we encounter a situation, our body generates a feeling, usually below the threshold of conscious awareness. The body goes through a series of searches to find a context and a content that is similar to what we just experienced, and it connects them arbitrarily. So one of the fastest ways to derail a cascade of feelings is to ask yourself a simple question. What else could this be? So if you're in a place and all of a sudden you start to feel anxious, stop. Change your posture, change your breathing. Ask yourself a question. What else could this be? Your brain will start generating alternatives. It disconnects you from that cascade of emotions that's usually on autopilot and gives you the ability to rename and reframe the feeling, which gives a whole other sequence of associations. Does that make sense? Okay. So, going back to the DVD. The red part, if you think of all the subjective experiences that you have, your traumas, your memories, your beliefs, your daydreams, your values, if they're all imprinted on a DVD, what must be true about the DVD? Or what's imprinted on it? What's that? Absolutely rewritable, 100% rewritable. What else must be true? If it works in the body. Mm-hmm. Very good, we're getting there. You did start with a clean slate. Here's the thing I want you to get. What's the one thing that will screw up a DVD? Well, let me just make it explicit. I'm not going to play the 20 questions game. Everything about that DVD presupposes that what's written on it is in a language the DVD player can interpret and understand. So the question becomes, what is that language? Well, if you look at your diagram, you'll see visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory. Think of these like channels. Okay, now if you've studied any kind of DVT, you go, oh, it's just NLP. No, it's not. NLP gave us a window into what we call the holographic nervous system. It didn't go far enough. Because when we start playing with things like submodalities and this visual, auditory, kinesthetic strategy or sequence, most people think you're just manipulating hallucinations. But what if these things actually had an energetic phenomenality to them? What if there was actually a vibrational construct in the space around you where these things were stored and that you accessed all the time outside of conscious awareness, because that's exactly what you do. So how do we start to break this apart in a non-neurolinguistic way? Remember that no matter what sequence of VAKOG you may be, nothing happens till you hit a feeling. So if you have 6 visuals, an auditory, and a smell before you get to the, that doesn't matter. Because the system doesn't take an action or initiate a behavior until you feel something. So if everything that we do begins and ends with a feeling, why don't we just start there? So this, some of you may have heard me say this. If you can point to where you feel it, you can change it. When we stood up and I had you remember a victorious time in your life, where did you feel it? Point to it. So I'm just curious, if there were a picture floating in the space around you that represents that amazing feeling you could reach out and touch, where would you reach out to touch it? Go ahead and do that, first impression. Pretend you know. Yeah. Now trace the outline of it with both hands so you know how big it is. Let's make sure we got the right one. Grab a hold of it. Now make it as big as the room without slugging the partner next to you. Notice what happens to the feelings in your body. You're smiling big. What happened, Jill? You had a baby? Well, go ahead, put your hands on there. Okay. So what happens if we go? What happens when you make the picture bigger? Feel it gets bigger. Okay, now bring it back to its original size. We're going to play the frame game with something I call the frame game in a minute. Now, as you hold this thing there, without changing the size of it, all I want you to do, slowly pull it closer to your body. Notice what happens to the feelings. Don't change the size of it. Because sometimes you want to see, what happens a lot of times, people don't realize they're doing this. Because your body wants to maintain equilibrium, what will happen is as they bring it closer, this will start to happen. And you counterbalance. So make sure the size is exactly the same. Make sure you're connected to it. Slowly pull it closer to your body and notice what happens. Ooh, some people are having a good time. Lift it up over your head. Pull it down around you like a big blanket. Woohoo! What's that? You need a blanket. I'll show you how to fix that in a minute. Right? You like this? Is this good? Excellent. Now, you can have the feeling back in just a moment. But for the sake of our drill, what I'd like you to do is unwrap that feeling. Lift it back up over your head. Now, how many of you guys know what a frisbee is? Yeah. I want you to imagine this thing's now like a frisbee. I want you to take that frisbee. I want you to throw it all the way behind you. Until it disappears behind the horizon completely. Scan your body. Notice what happened to the feelings. Regina, what'd you notice? Lighter. Were you working with a bad feeling that you wanted to get rid of? I have no idea. You feel better now that it's gone? Actually, I do. Sometimes bad stuff is connected to good stuff. I'll show you how to fix that too, right? So how many of you noticed, again, it's okay if you didn't, but how many of you noticed just now, that when you threw it behind you, it either dropped dramatically or just went away? Show of hands. Okay. How many of you know, by the way, this means I know the answer. This means I don't. This means I hope he doesn't call on me. Right? One of the things that we'll see in NLP, and this is again where I diverge from a lot of the doctrine, NLP says that each and every one of you are going to do it different. No. You have 2 sets of code. You have one you come off the assembly line with, and you have one that you develop, which we would call idiosyncratic or personalized. Right? Now, some of you, when you made that picture bigger, you may have noticed the feeling got smaller. That's okay. There's a bell curve for this. About 70-75% of the people are what I call expanders. When they make that picture bigger, those feelings are going to intensify. The other percentage, about maybe another 20%, are what I call condensers or concentrators. When they try to make the picture bigger, the feelings get more diffused. When they make the picture smaller, it gets more intense. It doesn't matter which one you are. Just know which one you are so you can work with the system. Does that make sense? What happened for you?
Okay, when I made it bigger, it got bigger.
Okay.
And then when I condensed it, it became more power and it was condensed more, so it held its original power, but it was in the manner and shape and size that filled.
So was it the first one you did overwhelming by any chance?
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
But it never
Great, great.
But it kept its density
But you got change, right?
without
And that's what we care about. You see, each and every one of you has a dashboard floating around the space around you that's actually connected to the space inside of you. When you point to where you feel it and you reach out and touch it, you create what we call a somatic bridge. Right? How many? I didn't see Dr. Bill's talk, but he talked about the homunculus. Right? Did he talk about that the two parts of your body that have the greatest degree of brain real estate is your eyes and your brain? Or your eyes and your hand, rather? Oh, you didn't talk about that? Okay. Yeah, when we look at how much surface area of the brain is devoted to each part of us, the two who get the lion's share are the eyes and your hands. So, when you point to where you feel something, you access information interoceptively. When you reach out and touch it, you access the corresponding information proprioceptively. Because you're using right and left hands, right hemisphere, left hemisphere. But because this is the second largest part of your brain, in terms of scope, more of your brain gets stimulated and focused into the process. So what happens is you start to connect all the different divisions of the neurology towards a specific outcome using a coding system that every part of you understands, which is why you get a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. Right? How many are familiar with the spinning techniques that we've done? Okay, magic frame. But if not, watch our YouTube channel. I want to. There's three techniques that I want to share with you today that are easily found on my YouTube channel, but they're based on the theory I'm going to share with you, which is this idea of what we call the holographic nervous system. But it starts with understanding that energy has two measurable aspects: the qualities it creates or it generates, and the amount of it. Feelings are how we can target the frequency in a body. Now, notice when I had you stand up, remember that victorious feeling? I said, notice there's a color. Maybe even a series of colors connected to that feeling. What color would that be for you, first impression? Right? Didn't matter what it was, as long as it's what came up first. In your manuals, your little manuals, you'll have a page called The 6 Dynamics of an Unconscious Response. That's an offer sheet. I have one left. Oh, okay. 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 All right. Who needs one? Okay. For Regina. For you. There you go. What's that? All right. We have one more left. And if anybody wants, I'll autograph them afterwards. No. Oh, there's 3. Oh, okay. People are sneaking out on me. All right. So, all right. Tell you what, I'll just put these somewhere back here. Because yes. All right. So, we all good? Okay. So, you didn't plug in the HDMI cable, did you? Oh, you did. Pardon me. Let me see if I can do this really quick. Hold on, let me pull my OneNote here. Oops. Like what? Oh, that's just a password name. Yeah. You think you know my password. All right. It's hard to stay on track when you don't have notes. But, so the first ring of the DVD is the substance. When we use the color breathing methodology that I started with at the beginning of class, we take a body feeling, which is a vibrational matrix with a certain set of qualities to it. We wash the body with that. How many people are familiar with something called a degaussing coil? You guys? Okay. Yeah. Back in the days when they had these things called cathode ray tubes or for video games, if you let the video monitor run for days and weeks at a time, it would build up a charge, right? And after a while, the field would start to blur the images, and it would get all blurry and gnarly. And every week or so, or a couple of weeks, the technician would come up with this big electromagnetic ring, and he'd plug it in, and he'd press the button, and go, and the pictures would go wacky, and all of a sudden, the electromagnetic fields would just rebalance, and the picture was pristine again. When you tap into the feelings, You're tapping into the frequency that is either the solution or the problem. You do not need to know, this is why I like these 3 techniques I'm going to share with you, what the problem, or you don't need to know the story. You don't need to engage in any form of hypnoanalysis to rid the body of the problem. And it does not matter if the problem is a physical one or an emotional one. Okay? At the level you're working at in the neurology, it's just data. The system will process it if you code it right. So I want you to understand that if we can point to where we feel it, we can change it. Now, when you're doing self-work, like this young lady here, she started manipulating her own code, and she calibrated things. The vast majority of you felt something, which is what's supposed to happen. Now, some people it's going to feel bigger, some people it's going to feel small. I don't care which one you are, just so that you know. Because the more you understand how this coding language works and how to integrate your physical gestures, your imagination, and your breath, you can change just about anything. Okay? And you'll get a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. So let me go back to this really quick. Like I said, I apologize. I was rushing around trying to get everybody their handouts, and I didn't get a chance to set up my own stuff. So, and by the way, the other handout that you have is a listing of all of our trainings for the next 6 months, for those of you who want to come and do live events. And there's also a really cool, in the back of it, it's also in your manual, there's this Mondo Supremo I Want It All package. Or, as I lovingly used to call it back in HypnoThoughts days, David's Screamin' Supreme Seminar DVD deal. But we don't do DVDs anymore. Right? So what this is it's your choice of any 2 live events in our 2022-2023 calendar. Total value of that is $4,500. You also get your choice of any 2 full-length video courses valued at $1,497 or less, and your choice of any 5 smaller digital video products. Total value, if you were to go to our website and try to buy this, would be $7,979. If you wanted to get this package today, it would be $3,394. You'd save about $4,585. And the reason that I'm telling you about this is not because I'm trying to sell it to you. It's because 2 people are going to win this before they leave today. Surprise! The only thing I got to figure out is how am I going to get all your names in a hat? Because I don't have a hat. And second of all, usually okay, we have a hat and we have a box. Now all I need you to do is write your shit on a piece of paper so I can pass something to pull from. So if you could take a minute, if you're taking notes or you have something to take notes on, write your name, email, and phone number. You must be present to win. On day 3, I'll be doing another talk. I think on day 3, I'll be raffling 2 more. So you might want to show up for that too. So once you write your name, email, phone number, I'd like you to just pass it on. Maybe Albert and maybe Richard could just collect those. A credit card, business card will work. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just pass it to the end. They'll collect. Yeah, whatever works, right? By the way, going back to what this lady said about it being overwhelming, something I want you guys to test for yourself in your clinics. When you deal with somebody who's dealing with overwhelming anxiety, panic attacks, things of that nature, first thing I want you to have them do is close their eyes and point to where they feel it. Just close your eyes for a minute, point to where you feel that, and then say to them, if there was a picture floating in the space around you that represented that feeling, a picture you could reach out and touch, where could you reach out and touch it, first impression? Notice their hand will go out somewhere. Now trace the outline of it with both of your hands. I'm going to bet when you actually have them trace the outline and where that picture is, it's right here, and it's this friggin' big. Because what I see from everybody with Asperger's to PTSD, a lot of times when they go into these overwhelming panic attacks or whatever, when you access the code, the imagery is almost always right here, even if they're not consciously aware of it. If you can get them to do that, point to where they feel it, reach out and touch it, and you say, well, just push it across the room and notice what happens. You'll see them go, ah. Because size and proximity act like a volume control knob to the intensity of emotional experience, positive or negative. NLP will tell you that you have a unique coding system for every single thing, and that's true enough to be true, but it's not true enough to be useful. right? So we're going to play with again, if I have time, and I would recommend that you read the manuals later, because most of the information I'm going to teach you is in here anyway, with the exception of the transformational triad, which is where we were going. So this is one of the fastest, most user-friendly ways to just get rid of shit anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. Now you notice the first one says magic frame. Right? Magic frame is a technique that allows us to open up this, by the way, this was called a holographic memory unit or holographic memory container. If you imagine a DVD that has a substance, which is the red line, 5 primary channels like a prism, and then within each of those channels are smaller distinctions or qualities. When all those come together, you have the content of the movie we're running in our heads that we think is the problem. Now, this is an integration of holographic memory resolution, neuro-linguistic programming, a lot of energetics, as well as hypnosis. So you can see we can use holographic memory resolution type techniques, which is your color breathing, to address the substance of the DVD. We can just blank it and completely vent the emotional charge. We can use an NLP type process, which we call the primary encoding system. Because everything that you run from a software perspective is coded in this. There is nothing in you that you do not relate to through this primary encoding system. Okay? And then, of course, you have the smaller distinctions, which we don't spend as much time with as NLP would because not all of them are useful. But one of the things, how many people do a lot of trauma work? Okay. There's a phenomena that comes up in trauma work called alexithymia. Anybody familiar with that term? Okay, if you haven't, I recommend you read, if you haven't read the book already, read The Body Keeps the Score by Basil van der Kolk. Excellent, excellent book. He talks about it briefly in one of his chapters. Alexithymia is an inability to put a name to an emotion or series of emotions. Now, here's what's interesting about that from a therapeutic perspective. If you can't name it, you can't process it unless you turn it into a color or a sound or a smell or a taste. The cortexes will run any of those, right? And because English is actually missing words for certain types of emotions that other languages have, colors are actually the fastest way to just circumvent that block. So again, if they point to where they feel it, they can change it. Why? Because your nervous system, when it takes in information, so you have a primary experience, right? So you're trucking through the world. Here we go. Oops, that didn't work out the way I planned it. So I want you to think of 2 types of experiences. A primary experience and a secondary experience. A primary experience is I'm driving down the road, happy as a clam, get T-boned by a car. That's something that physically happened external to the body, right? But that's not what screws us up. What screws us up is the secondary representation, the secondary experience, which is the recording that we made of the experience. Many of you have heard me say, you are not the way you are because of the shit that happened to you. You are the way you are because of the way you recorded the shit that happened to you and the way you've been relating to those recordings, right? Well, you are the DVD player and you create the DVDs. If we understand that we need to get all the systems lined up, I point to where I feel it, I access all of the vibrational information that's circulating throughout the body. Your body, when information comes in, you have that primary experience. It passes through the 5 cortexes of the brain. It's broken up into 5 channels of information that are put back together to create the movie of your experience. And the subtle distinctions, whether it's color or black and white or blurry or distinct, those tell your body how to play the experience for you, right? And everything's going to end in a feeling. But all of that, when you conceptualize it, first of all, information comes in like white light through a prism. It's broken up into these channels, and the channels are broken up into that, right? So once again, you have the DVD substance, you have 5 channels, 5 subchannels, all that comes together to form the story. Now you can inject change at any level or all of them if you want to, using the 3 techniques that I've just created, or I've just outlined for you. We're going to talk about Magic Frame first because this is what I do with my clients all the time as part of their intake. You know, I bring them in, I'll do heavy hand, light hand, basic, classic hypnotic stuff. But then what I want to know is how responsive are they to their proprioceptive grid? We'll talk about the proprioceptive grid in a minute. So I have a point to where they feel it because that gives me the node. When we start to call up information, the call goes out to every part of the body, accesses those data points, it brings it back, and it reassembles it, just like a cloud server does. Now, I'm not sure if I should use that metaphor because I don't know how many people are familiar with how a cloud server actually works. But you take a file, you upload it to the cloud, right? And all of a sudden, it breaks that data up into billions and billions and millions of stuff and scatters it throughout the system. Then when you need that information, a call goes out to all those servers, and that stuff is reconstructed. Now, here's the thing. We all know this. Your memories are not accurate. You guys know this, right? Your memories are not even accurate depictions of shit that actually happened to you. They change every time you reconstruct them. You say, what? Right? Again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want you to see how all this fits together. Now, a lot of people labor under certain types of illusions when it comes to change work. They operate under the delusion that their memories are real, that they are in fact the thing that happened to them, right? And it's not. So the first thing I tell my clients is the very fact that you could sit in this chair and remember what happened means you already beat everything you faced. It didn't kill you. You're here. The rest is cleanup, right? That is amazingly liberating to them because they believe the shit's still happening. But the very fact that they can sit in your room and describe what happened and feel things means they beat whatever it was. So they're not the way they are because of the shit that happened to them. They are the way they are because of the way they're relating to the recordings they made. And they have complete control over that. And that's why the frame game I played with you is one of the most liberating things you can do with a first-time client, because it doesn't look like hypnosis. But the moment you point to it, they're in trance. The moment they reach out and touch it, they're in somnambulism. Right? Erickson said it. Most moments of trauma are moments of self-hypnosis. Right? If I can point to where I feel it, I can access it. If I can reach out and touch it, I can change it. After that, you just got to ask certain questions. Now, in your handouts, there's a page called Body-Centered Energy Hypnotherapy or Energy Psychology. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is somatic address. There's always a body location where the trauma is, which is where the information in the system comes to a head that triggers the cascade of everything else. The moment I point to it, I've actually accessed all the different nodes in the body where that information is stored. So by manipulating from this point, I get all of the fragments, right? Anybody ever notice, like after a regression session or something, like 80, 90% of it's gone, but every now and then they get in these certain situations and they get a little flashback, right? It's because there are fragments left. When you do the color breathing process that we did with Victory, you degauss the body. You clear all the remaining fragments in the body. So you start with the location, and then you wrap it around and you breathe it through the system, right? But because you've got all this somatic work going too, your neurology doesn't know the difference between something that's objectively solid versus something that's you're imagined in your hands. It's all the same. And so what happens is you recruit the entire system, not just at the physical level, but at the astral level, if you're into the etheric level and all that stuff. You recruit from the mental body down. Does that make sense? Okay. So one of the problems that we have, though, is that sometimes an event, let me go back to the transformational, I'll do this. This is what we're going to play with next. This is in your books. This is called your proprioceptive grid. Now, some of you are familiar with this representation. You might be familiar with this thing they call the aura, right? You can use that model, but I don't find it to be as precise as what I'm about to share with you. You know you have 3 brains, right? You have the head brain, the heart brain, the gut brain. Human heart radiates, it has its own nervous system. It radiates an electromagnetic field that is measurable by instruments from 3 to 8 feet in diameter from the body. It's permeating and emanating emotional data. And so as people move through the world, you can entrain with your heart can entrain with somebody's brain, and they'll pick up that information. You can entrain with somebody's heart to heart, they'll pick up that information. It's not woo-woo, this is the research. Now, this is actually from a book called Heart Math, or from a free ebook on heartmath.org, who've done some great research on this, where they literally took a dog and his boy. Somebody got that, right? And they went out, they strapped him up to measuring devices, had him go out and play, and in 15 minutes their heartbeat synchronized. They did it with horses too. So this is not a human thing. It's a living being thing, right? This field also interacts with your proprioceptive neurology and your mirror neurons, which forms the foundation of empathic communication. This is why rapport is so important to what we do. Because the more we can match the frequencies a person has, the more anything we do with our system, their system copies. Right? If you've ever been in a room with guys like Richard Bandler who put the entire room in trance, it's because he's literally overlaying his grid onto your neurologies, and any imagery he creates, your mirror neurons fire off. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted you to understand that this is interesting, but not useful. This is both interesting and useful. And I'm not just saying that because I made it up. Where's my pointer? Where's the microphone or the, I don't know, wherever it is. All right, I'll just point to it. Anyway, so if we take that helix, that toroid type shape, and we make it into a cube that you're standing at the center of. I'm going to just give it to you up front. You can go to my videos and watch, or I'll let you play with it if you want to. If you take this blue line as the axis, the spinal cord, you have the boundary of the bodies, and you have the forward, what I call the forward hemisphere. Anything that is open, active, and running. Think of a file on your desktop, right? And some files you want to see them better, you make them bigger, don't you? And they can cover other files. Your neurology works very much the same way. Anything in the forward or anterior quadrant is a file in your system that's open, active, and running. Think of it just like a big freaking vibrational filing cabinet. Because it's vibrational data, you can have an infinite amount of it in the same location. Okay? The moment you start moving towards the center line of the body, the information starts to become progressively more identified and embodied. How many noticed when you wrapped it around you, you were like in it? Why? Because you passed the boundary of the body. What did you notice when the picture started moving behind you? Gone, or at least greatly diminished? This is what we want. This is what every single human being in this room does to some degree. Now, are there other ways to access this information? NLP says yes. Not useful in a group, though. If I take information that is in my forward hemisphere, I link it to my body, and I move it behind me, the neurology automatically begins to recode it as over, complete, and done.
So you do this through visualization with the client?
I don't care if they visualize it or not. I just want them to touch it. You could do, again, if they have like aphantasia where they can't see pictures, doesn't matter. You have them pretend. Because the same part of you that creates all this shit is the same part of you that pretends. Right? If in your manuals, there'll be another page called 6 Dynamics of an Unconscious Response. And if you want to drop resistance from whatever you're getting in your clients to about 0, teach this to them first. Your unconscious mind always answers first. It always answers honestly, usually non-verbally. Always feels like you're making it up. You always have an urge to edit what just came up. It's almost never loud. It's almost like a whim or a notion in the back of your mind. That off in the distance feeling doesn't mean it's weak. It means it's deep. Okay? And finally, it's almost never linear. If you do any type of regression, you know this. Go back to the very first scene, situation, or event that is the source, the beginning, the root cause of XYZ problem. They come in for something that happened in their 30s. All of a sudden, they're 5 years old, watching mom and dad argue over the last bottle of beer. Right? They go, what? And conscious mind's having an expectation of, that can't be right. Yeah, it's right. But because they didn't know that the unconscious mind answers differently than the conscious mind, they invalidate the response. They invalidate the information. Teach this to them first, and then anything that you would have counted as resistance previously actually makes you more credible, because it absolutely matches their internal experience in the chair. Because isn't that what this? Oh, I heard everything you said, or I think I was just making that up, or that can't be right, right? The minute you tell them this, and they have that experience, guess who the authority is? Right? But if you wait until they have the experience to try to explain this to them, now it sounds like you're defending yourself. So you inoculate them and prime them first, and your compliance goes way up. Compliance goes way up. Okay? So it's in your manuals, and I'm happy to go over it again if you want. The keys to this, by the way, are in your language, and you'll hear it in your client's language. How many of you have ever had a client say, I just can't get around to this? Right? Anybody ever hear that? I never seem to get around to it. Well, when you get around something, where does it end up? I need to get over this. When you get over something, where does it end up? I need to put this behind me. As above, so below. Make sense? When people talk and they describe their problems, watch where their hands go. I got this thing, and I just wish I knew what it was. If I could find it, I could get rid of it. It's all I think about. I wonder why. If you have good rapport, really good rapport, you can walk up to them and say, well, here, let's just put that over here. And they'll go, don't believe me, play with it. Because as far as the neurology is concerned, you're just vibrations, different densities of vibration, and each of those vibrations is going to give a certain set of qualities to it. When you start playing with proximity, you start playing with the intensity, which is it's a quality, right? There's a lot of other things going on here, but I want to give you the basics of this, because this is where the power is. Pretty much any human being that comes off the assembly line, they have this system hardwired into you. Now, you will develop, from a neurolinguistic perspective, you will develop your own way of doing things. If I were to ask you, if you could imagine something that was true once and is now done, and you could point to it, where would you point to it, first impression? 9 times out of 10, you'll point to somewhere out in front of you. Or you point it behind you, right? I'll put it back there, right? Most of the time, if you don't tell them this part first, they'll point to somewhere out in front of them because you have other locations, right? But your location is going to be different from your location. Whereas for most of you in this room, the behind you location is pretty standard. It's pretty generic and universal, which makes it useful, right? It doesn't really matter how your clients do it, as long as you know how they do it, which is why we play the frame game when they come in. And I always use pleasure, because who resists it? Right? If you say safety, which is always what when we actually do the work, we actually give a safe resource, right? But problem is, if someone's had a very abusive childhood, they may not remember a time when they felt safe. So you want people to come out feeling empowered and feeling really good. So what do? Remember a time in your life when you felt the most amazing, wonderful, most satisfying, thrilling, fulfilling pleasure ever? And then you give them parameters. It could be something as simple as biting into a freshly baked chocolate chip cookie right out of the oven. Or maybe it was your first romantic experience. Maybe it was when your child was born. Whatever it is, I want you to just point to where you feel it, first impression. Now, if there were a picture connected to that feeling, a picture you could reach out and touch, where would you reach out and touch it? First impression. Boom. Now you manipulate the picture. And every time they manipulate the picture, they go deeper into trance. And they're in somnambulance, because what are they doing? They're seeing something that ain't there. Right? They're seeing something that ain't there. And if they say, well, I don't see it, well, pretend you do. Instant trance. Yes?
Does this work in a group setting?
Yes. I do it all the time. I do it all the time. I do it on webinars. What's that? I did. Yeah. right? How many didn't know what the picture was, but every time you made it bigger, it felt fucking good, didn't it? That's the beauty of this. We don't need to know. So it could be the most heinous thing if we're getting rid of shit being a technical term, right? Specialized hypnotic influence techniques. We as therapists don't need to know. We need to know the minimum amount. We just need to know where it is and how they code. And because they're doing it, remember this. This one isn't in your manual, but this is important. What the human what the human nervous system creates, the human nervous system accepts. If they create it, they accept it. Right? It's the difference between a transplanted organ and a cloned one. Right? If I give you an arbitrary metaphor or suggestion, maybe her software will run it, maybe it won't. She'll accept it, but there might be some resistance because it didn't come her. It's not structured directly the way she does it. But if she creates it, perfect. So, if you tell a client to do something, they suddenly say, well, it's not like that, it's like this. Great, do it like that. And they will literally create their own cure. You just got to guide them, right? But this is one of the most important things that you, for yourself especially, but also for your clients. They can be working with the most heinous things, and you don't need to unpack anything. You can preserve their sense of propriety, avert the shame, whatever. But there's a specific technique that works with this system. It's called the magic frame. Every now and then we encounter something that your neurologist says, we got to make sure he or she remembers this because we got to make sure it never happens again. And what happens a lot of times is when the neurology creates one of these, remember, this is an idealized, perfected, conceptual idea. It's more like soup, right? Right? This is all nice and organized, but it's more like soup. Did you ever try to unmake soup? It doesn't work out really well. So what happens a lot of times functionally is the unconscious mind is down there and says, wow, we can finally get rid of this. Wait a minute. He learned this. And if that goes, he might make the same mistake again. How do I make sure that this doesn't happen? Well, your unconscious mind doesn't have a way to just keep a piece of it unless you teach it. So what happened, and this is how you know that you're in this kind of a magic frame situation. It goes away, and it comes back. So on a scale of 0 to 10, they have this problem. They rate it at an 8. You spin it, you frame it, you color breathe, whatever you're going to do, or whatever other intervention you do. It goes away, and then an hour later, a week later, a day later, it comes back. Magic frame situation. Or, as is often the case if you're doing spinning or color breathing, you spin it, it drops from an 8 to a 2, and it doesn't go any further. You got to frame it. So if you look at the structure I gave you in terms of this transformational try, this is why magic frame is at the top. It's just frame it before you do anything else. Because if there are any safety lessons that the neurology is trying to preserve, this will allow you to extract that safety lesson from the rest of the soup so they can keep those lessons and let everything else go. Now, I've done this on everything from cancer patients to knee pain to breakups to you name it. It doesn't matter because it's all data. Your neurology really doesn't make much of a distinction between physical pain and emotional pain. If you want to check on the science behind that, go to pubmed.gov, type in acetaminophen and pain of rejection. Right? They wanted to find out if there was any real difference between physical pain and emotional pain. Where do they actually work in the brain? Turns out that if you experience the pain of rejection and you take a Tylenol, it goes away. Same part of the brain. Same part of the brain. So if that's true on the organic or physiological level, must be true on the vibrational one as well. As above, so below. Right? So what we're saying here is we extrapolate, it's just data that the neurology is processing. And 9 out of 10 things that go into a doctor's office is memory-based, especially if it's chronic. Right? The only 3 disciplines I've found that directly access the mental body, hypnosis, NLP, holographic memory resolution. Everything else does it in a very indirect way, if at all. That's why Reiki takes so long many times. I've been a Reiki master since before Reiki was cool. right? Like the 90s, right? I was studying Huna, or Kabbalah, back before Madonna even heard of Kabbalah. That's why I'm very much a pre-Madonna. But let's talk about this magic frame, because it's going to be one of your best friends. So when we look at magic frame, you point to where you feel it, you reach out and touch it. Now, once you have this, first thing I ask them is, let's make sure we've got the right one. Sound familiar? Reach out with both of your hands, trace the outline of that picture with both of your hands so you know how big it is. Now let's make sure we got the right one. Grab it, make it bigger. Does the feeling get stronger or weaker? First impression, right? Now bring it back to its original size, pull it closer to your body. Does it get stronger or does it get weaker? The moment they do that, you know how they code. You know how they code. Now, if you're dealing with somebody who's a concentrator, in other words, when they make the picture smaller, it gets more intense, you just have them make the picture huge. And then move it behind them. Right? Almost everybody, by the way, for some reason, when they bring it closer, it always intensifies. That's the one thing I've found the least amount of wiggle room in. Now, every now and then, you're going to get someone who has extra layers of dissociation between their body feelings and the construct. I'll tell you how to fix that. It's kind of aggressive. Make sure they're ready for it. So what you do, and there's a story behind it, but if I tell the story, I won't have time to do the class. So. But I'm happy to talk about it throughout the weekend. Point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it. In fact, there's a video when I was teaching in Florida for the first time. There was a lady in the room. She goes, I don't feel it as much. I said, do you want to feel it? She goes, uh-huh. I said, are you sure? She goes, uh-huh. I said, okay. Point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it. I said, grab hold of it. She grabs a hold of it. I say, slam it into your body. Now pull it out. Now slam it in. Now pull it out. And I had her do it like 20 times. And she, all that insulation just went, and she busted out crying. So it doesn't really matter how much intensity is there as long as you get some shifts. But if you get those situations, pull it in, take it out. Pull it in, take it out. After about 3 or 4 of them, they're going to reestablish those connections, and the system's going to become much more pliable. Okay? But notice everything I'm doing involves my body. This is a big one. If you get the body involved, it doesn't matter what the conscious mind believes. It doesn't matter what the conscious mind believes, because the neocortex is the weakest part of you. We start operating from the meat and the paleocortex up, it will overwrite the neocortex. Okay? And I have a story for that. Which is actually, I'll tell it really quick. I was going through going for my master's degree in Oriental medicine, and I was studying Oriental massage. And somehow I spleefed and realized I had a midterm, but never practiced it. It was a practical. And everybody had gotten their partners that had been practicing for weeks except me. So I'm sitting there, there's 7 people ahead of me. I got maybe 20, 30 minutes to become an expert in Tui Na that I haven't studied, and I don't have a partner. Fortunately for me, I've been a martial artist most of my life. We have this thing called kata, where you get to do these prearranged movements with imaginary partners. So, well, what if I just imagine somebody sitting there, right? And I just do it on them. So I imagine a guy in a chair, right? And I start working his shoulder, I start working the hip, and I think I had to do low back. I don't remember anything after that. Because about 20 minutes later, I wake up, dripping sweat, and everybody in the room was looking like, because I completely forgot there wasn't a guy there. Don't believe me. You don't got to believe it. That's the beauty of this. You don't got to believe any of this for it to work. You just got to not fight it. Your clients don't have to believe. Sometimes it works better if they don't. Right? I was teaching a class up in LA once, and there was this guy there. You know these guys who are just going to humor you. They don't want to do it. They're just going through the motions, right? And I was talking about spinning. I said, point where you feel it, take it out, spin it. And he's like, I would make it the opposite way. And he's like, and about 25, 30 seconds into it, and I said, slam it back in. I grabbed him over the spot. I held it there, and he breaks out in this sweat. He goes, what the fuck just happened? Right? If you go watch some of my videos on YouTube, you'll see me bring people up for a demo, and I say, I'm not actually going to do the technique. We're just going to walk through it. Every time. Every single time. You don't need to know. You don't need to believe it. You just got to have all the parts in place. okay? And have them not actively fight it, right? So, why magic frame? Magic frame allows us to reach into this construct, find the reasons they have for holding on to it, and take them out, so it'll let the rest go. So you have them point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it, trace the outline of it with both of your hands so you know how big it is. You do that part, now put a big, thick black frame around it. And I usually have a little joke. You'll have me say, you're probably too young to remember when televisions had real dials and knobs and switches instead of touch screens and remote controls. That's strategic, by the way. Do it every time. Why? Because they laugh. The minute they laugh, they start getting more neuroplastic. And I'll have my hand right, if their hands are right here, I'll put my hand right here and I'll be looking right at the knobs. Say, find the knob that controls the brightness or the contrast. Turn that knob all the way to the right until the image whites out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Now turn the image all the way to the left until the image blacks out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Tell me which one you like better. Does it matter which one they pick? No. Why? Because I've just co-opted their entire neurology. Because there's one piece that screws us up as hypnotists. It's that gnarly conscious mind, which likes to analyze, criticize, judge. So what do? I give it something to analyze. They like it black or they like it white. Right? Take the index finger of your dominant hand. Now there were lessons that this experience had to teach you, positive or negative. And in glowing golden letters across that whited out or blacked out screen, I want you to write those lessons on the screen. So you can keep all the lessons and let everything else go. Make sure that's in there. Write all the lessons and let everything else go. What does everything else mean? Everything else. Now here's where it's going to get sticky. So, and I guess this is my script. You can use it or not. I say some people know exactly what to write, and they just right. Some people have no conscious idea what to write, but that's okay because your unconscious mind always knows. And so just let it write, like automatic writing, whatever it needs to. And then I give it other options. Some people just draw pictures. Some people just draw squiggles. Some people get reacting, right? Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you across the screen. Some people write with both hands simultaneously, like they're writing Chinese and Hebrew at the same time. However your body does it, that's perfectly okay. Just let your body do it. They always do. Right? And the screen will scroll just like a tablet. So you have an infinite amount of writing space. You just keep writing so you can keep all the lessons and let everything else go. When you know you're done, just nod your head to let me know. And you just wait and you just encourage them, keep going. Now, about 25% of the time, you're going to get a scalding ab reaction. Cool. Just keep writing. They may be gagging, threatening to hurl. Just keep writing. Because as long as they're writing, they're venting. As long as they're venting, they're processing. They won't throw up, by the way. They just go through the motions because they're not purging physically. They're purging energetically. Right? Just keep writing. When you're done, just nod your head to let me know. You hold that space for them. When you're done, reach up, shrink that frame down to the size of a postage stamp or even smaller. Notice how the feelings in your body shift and changes with every breath you take and every beat of your heart. Your unconscious mind moves it all the way back behind the horizon until it disappears behind the horizon completely. Then I ask him a question. I say, you know the sound a hammer makes when you're banging on a nail or a nail gun? And I go, feel that nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back. When you know it's nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back, test it. Try to bring it back and notice what happens instead. They can't bring it back. They're going to get 3 possible answers. They try to bring it back, they can't. They try to bring it back, the new feeling they have just gets better. Or you ask them to try and bring it back, they look at you, get pissed off, and say, I don't want it back. You're done. Right? Then what you do, just to be consistent and comprehensive, you ask them, scan your body, notice how different you feel. Scale of 0 to 10, rate the remaining feelings. If there are any other feelings, now you can spin it, or you can color breathe it, or you can frame it again. Right? The reason we do the frame first, you can do them in any order. But the reason we do this is because we spin it, it goes away. If there's a safety lesson, it might come back. Or we might reach a part we have to frame it anyway. So we might as well just get it out of the way. Right? We can color breathe it, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Right? And the way we hit the way we do color breathing is, again, through what we call, it's in your manuals, it's called the semantic search engine. How many people ever heard this thing called Google? Did you ever notice that when you ask Google a question, the kind of answer you get is almost always directly influenced by the way you ask the question?
Yep.
Your neurology works the same way. See, we all know that the conscious mind has an aperture of about 7 plus or minus 2 bits of data, right? Which is like a little tiny pinhole. But we know that this puppy is a bit bigger. So what's interesting is when you ask the neurology for information, the neurology will give you exactly what you ask for and nothing else. It doesn't mean the information's not there. So one of the two things you really need is absorption and focus. How do you generate absorption? You ask for more data. You ask for more data. So if you point to where you feel it, notice there's a color connected to that feeling. Give it a whiff. What does it smell like? Notice which direction it's moving. Right? These are all attributes, qualities that we're looking for. And the moment we start asking the neurology for qualities, it gives them to us. The more different qualities you ask for, the more that brain lights up like a Christmas tree. The more resources start getting allocated in that direction to that change work. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't usually explain this degree, but you're all clinicians, so I gotta give you some meat. So, what do? You point to where you feel it, reach out and touch it, put a big black frame around it, blacken or darken the image out, write in glowing golden letters, shrink it down, move it behind you, nail it back there, wash, rinse, repeat. Right? Very fast. If you have people who have a lot of they've been in a car accident and they have this little ache that just doesn't seem to go away, frame it, it'll go away. Because that's kind of think of it like a variation of phantom limb pain. Because the unconscious mind says, I don't think I trust him to not do this again. How am I going to make sure he never does this again? I know. If I put a little ache there right on the boundary, every time he gets close, he gets a little twinge. It'll remind him not to do that shit again because he was a dumb fuck 3 times before. Right? So what do? You point to where you feel it, you reach out and touch it, you frame it. Unconscious mind says, oh, he got it. I can let it go now. Because the unconscious mind's job is to protect you. But every boneheaded decision you ever made was a conscious one. And it makes sense if you think about it. Because the conscious mind is a 2-year-old of the body. Literally the neocortex, the new layer, right? So this is why when we start generating change from the most primal level upward, everything generalizes. It has to. It goes both ways. And you'll see analogs to this, by the way, in a lot of old Chinese medicine, not the People's Republic crap that we've been force-fed, but the folk systems and the things that predate communist China. A lot of this stuff is in there. So, anybody got some stuff they want to get rid of? Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to do it as a group. Stand up. Now, here's the thing. If you're going to do this, if you're going to do this work on yourself, there's something else I need to teach you first, but I don't have time. But if people want to get together and do some unofficial classes, talk to Stephanie. She might be able to work something out. If you want to do Godzilla in the room, you can because I'm guiding you. But if you want to do self-work, there's this thing we call bucket listing, and it's approach. And if you understand how the neurology works and you apply this bucket listing principle, your self-work gets a whole lot easier and consistent, right? Because our neurology, you have this thing called a negativity bias. You guys know this? Anything that's bad is 4 times more powerful than any good thing that happens, right?
Is that universal?
Mostly, yeah. It's a neurology thing. It's an adaptive function of the human nervous system from thousands of years. Nothing gets us off faster than being in pain or afraid, right? Mother Nature can be a mean bitch sometimes, but she's really practical, right? There's an old saying that, comfort zones are wonderful things, but nothing ever grows there. Any major changes you've ever had usually had some discomfort involved, right? The neurology, this is just how we evolved. Now, if you understand that 4-to-1 ratio, you can work with it. Because all you got to remember consciously is that any negative feeling that you're having is actually only 25% as bad as you're making it out to be. Your neurology is designed to lie to you. It's a funhouse mirror. Right? And I tested this because you guys know I have a really big YouTube channel. And you know, I never have a negative comment on my YouTube channel. Everybody loves me and thinks I'm 100% legit. So I decided to test this shit. So I'd go and I'd read the latest comments on my YouTube channel and see, you know, for every flame I got, how many good ones did I have to read before I started to feel better? About 4 to 6. Now that's a suck ratio, but you can work with it. Because if you get nailed with one negative thing, you got to have 4 ice cream sundaes to make that shit better. Right? So here's what I want you. I want you to think of something that's on a shittiness scale. If you want to do something big, you can, but then I got to come back and make sure you don't like leak all over the place, and that's all right. But the best part about these 3 exercises, or these 3 drills, is they will work on just about anything, and you can use them in any order or sequence. They're completely modular. And it doesn't matter if you're in a line at Starbucks, in a parking lot, at a mall. One of my students came to my Identity by Design class, wonderful mom. She was flying back to Hawaii, and she was in line at the airport, and the guy ahead of her was a Afghan war vet. And he started having a PTSD episode right in the middle of the airport. They were getting ready to call security on him. She'd just come from my class. She walked up to him, she goes, "Hi, I'm Elaine. Point to where you feel it." He's like, "Huh? Point to where you feel it." She spun it. Gone. He followed her around the airport for the next 3 hours. They got on the same plane. He talked to her the entire time on the plane. When they got off in Hawaii, she handed him his Wounded Warrior jacket. That's the power you have. Anytime, that's what being a real-world hypnotist means, by the way. Anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. You just do the job. You don't quit. Okay? So, if you want to do something big, be my guest. I recommend for practice you do a 1 to 3, right? Because if you can do a 1 to 3, you can do Godzilla. Close your eyes, point to where you feel it. Scale of 0 to 10, rate the intensity of the feeling. Now, if there were a picture floating in the space around you, a picture you could reach out and touch, go ahead, reach out and touch it, first impression. That's it. Now take both of your hands. Trace the outline of that picture with both of your hands so you know how big it is. Let's make sure we got the right one. Grab the edges of it, make the picture bigger. Notice what happens to the feeling. Does it get stronger or does it get weaker? And bring it back to its original size. Keep the size of the picture exactly the same. Slowly pull it closer to your body. Does the feeling get stronger or weaker? Put it back. Now, as you look at that picture, I want you to go ahead and put a big, thick, black frame around it. The bigger, thicker, and blacker, the better. As you look at that frame and the base of that frame, you're going to notice some dials and knobs and switches like on an old-style television. You're probably too young to remember when that shit had those things, but find the knob that controls the brightness or the contrast. Turn that knob all the way to the right. Physically reach out, turn that knob all the way to the right until the image whites out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Turn the knob all the way to the left until the image blacks out completely. Notice how that makes you feel. Decide for yourself which one you like better. Then turn that knob all the way in that direction. When you got that, take the index finger of your dominant hand. As you look at that whited out screen, there are some lessons that this experience had to teach you, positive or negative. In glowing golden letters on that whited out screen, I want you to write those lessons so you can keep all the lessons and let everything else go. Now, some people know exactly what those lessons were, and they write those lessons like at the speed of light. Some people have no frickin' idea what the lessons were, but their unconscious mind always knows. So just let the unconscious mind write, like automatic writing. Some people draw pictures. Some people draw squiggles. Every now and then, some asshole motherfucker goes, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you," across the screen. That's okay. Some people write with both fingers simultaneously, like they're writing Chinese or Hebrew at the same time. However your body does it, however it works best for you, just keep going. You may notice feelings and emotions come up. That's okay too. Put them on the screen so you can keep all the lessons and let everything else go. There you go. Keep going. You got this. Beautiful. Now, the screen will scroll like a tablet will scroll, so you have an infinite amount of writing space. And if it takes you 40 minutes to write that shit out, have at it, because that's exactly how long my wife takes to do just about everything. When I do this with her, I literally have to strap in for the night. Okay? Just keep writing. When you know you're done, and only when you know you're done, take all the time you need to do this. Just reach up physically with your hands. Shrink that frame down to the size of a postage stamp or even smaller. Notice how the feelings in your body shift and change with every breath you take and every beat of your heart. Your unconscious mind moves that frame all the way behind you till it disappears back beyond the horizon. You know the sound a hammer makes when you're banging on a nail? Feel it nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back. And when you know it's nailed back there for all eternity, impossible to come back, test it. Try to bring it back and notice what happens instead. And when you're satisfied, open your eyes, notice how good you feel. What happened?
I'm fucking amazing.
Keep going. What's that, sweetie?
I said I'm fucking amazing.
You're fucking amazing. Pretty cool, huh? Now, next piece. From here, I can go in either direction. I can spin something, or I can color breathe it. So now that you got rid of that shit, what would you like instead? That's the next magic question for the semantic search engine. What would you like instead? Whatever it is, I call this your Steven Spielberg moment. I want you to create an alternate reality movie where you got exactly what you want in exactly the way you want it. And I want you to make that movie awesome. I want you to make it big as a drive-in movie theater screen. Crystal clear like an IMAX. Turn up the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the feelings. Best life ever. And as you do that, notice that there's a place in your body where those wonderful feelings start. Where they grow, where they spread from, point to where you feel it. Notice there's a color, maybe even a series of colors connected to those amazing feelings. What color or colors would that be for you, first impression? You don't got to tell me, just know. Whatever it is, as you watch that movie, I want you to not only watch it once, I want you to watch it over and over and over again. Not once, not twice, but hundreds and thousands of times at the speed of thought. With each repetition, I want you to make it 10 times better, 100 times more thrilling, fulfilling, and satisfying than ever before. Keep running it. Step into it and live it first person over and over and over again. And as you do, notice how those feelings in your body begin to grow. They begin to expand. They begin to fill the entire room and your body from the top of your head to the tips of your toes and all points in between. And then it just keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger until it becomes so strong, so powerful. It begins to radiate from your body like the rays of the sun, forming a beautiful colored frame around that new reality movie that you've created. When you're ready to own it, to personify it, to embody it completely, physically reach out with both of your hands, grab that frame and the reality inside of it, lift it up over your head, expand it to fill the infinite universe. Pass it through your entire being, from head to toe, mind, body, and soul. And notice what happens to every part of your body that was out of harmony with this new reality. And just keep going until you know it's done. Now, many times people get warm all over. Sometimes they break out in a sweat. Some people laugh, some people yawn, some people cry, some people twitch. There you go. When you're done, you know it's locked in. Possible to go back. Test it. Try to go back to the old way of being. And notice what happens instead. Yawning's good. Yawning means you're working. Some people laugh, some people yawn, some people cry, some people twitch, some people break out in a sweat, some people get hot all over, some people feel tingly. However your body does it, it's just your neurology resetting itself. It's just the emotional detox. There's no need to measure it, manage it, or make it happen faster. Just allow the process to take place. And when you know it's done, test it. Try to bring the old feeling back. Try to turn the new feeling off. And notice what happens instead. And when you're done, just look up here and notice how good you feel. There's some happy. Pretty cool, huh? So in this particular model, you have a seat. Give yourselves a big round of applause. We went from magic frame to color breathing. Now, the engine that drives color breathing, you can have a seat. You guys want to do more, don't you? Like, I'm ready now. We will, I promise. But I have to be out of here by 5:31, so 10 minutes. So I got a lot to do, and to quote the Smokey and the Bandit, I got a long way to go and a short time to get there. right? Now, color breathing is the newest addition to our arsenal. And it does exactly the same things I've been talking about. It integrates. One of the things you'll see if you study old metaphysics and magical practices, and whether you're coming from the Eastern European systems, the Egyptian systems, or you're looking at the Taoist, Chinese, Buddhist, and Tibetan systems, they all talk about elements. Yes? The one thing they all agree on is the air element corresponds to the mind. It's also in charge of boundaries. It separates and it connects. It's the link between psyche and soma. So when you get the physical body engaged, you get the imagination engaged, you get the conscious mind engaged, and you link it through the breath, you get a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. That doesn't invalidate things like EFT or old school NLP or any of that stuff. It just means there are parts missing, which is why it takes longer. The more things you leave out, the harder the system has to work. Does that make sense? So while we live in a reductionist society, it's always trying to separate A from B and B from C and 1 from 2 and 2 from 3. Let's not do that. Let's put them all back together the way the universe intended and notice what happens, right? So magic frame, when in doubt, frame it out. Now you can do good stuff with it. You can amplify positive stuff with it too, right? Energy spinning works on an engine called resonant frequency generator. So there's a negative feeling in your body, right? How do you know it's negative? It feels bad, right? Well, guess what? That's a frequency. What generated the frequency? What generated the frequency? It's not a trick question, huh? Emotion, your nervous system. That's everything we're talking about, all the same nervous system, right? Your body's generating a negative feeling, which is a negative energy or vibrational matrix. What created it? Your nervous system. What the nervous system creates, the nervous system can change. How? Not through your conscious mind. You have to ask a question. What do I want instead? What do I want instead? Your brain must seek to answer any question you put to it, regardless of how stupid the question is. And you all know this because you've all had clients who come to you and say, "Why does this always happen to me?" And the unconscious mind is down there going, motherfucker wants a list. Here you go. The quality of your life will be determined by the quality of the questions you ask. But therapeutically, the most powerful thing you can ask is, what do you want instead? Doesn't matter what they say. So can you imagine what that, keyword, might be like? Can you imagine what that might be like? It doesn't matter if you agree with it or not. Because what the nervous system creates, the nervous system... Thank you, my vested brother. What the nervous system creates, the nervous system accepts. The nervous system does not resist itself. So if you generate it, your neurology will run it. So what the magic question is, what do you want instead? And then what do you do? Well, I call this your Steven Spielberg moment. I want you to create an alternate reality movie. And I want you to make it awesome. I want you to make it big as a drive-in movie theater screen. Crystal clear like an IMAX. Turn up the sound, the smell, the taste, the feelings. Best life ever. Then you have them run it. If you want, have them step into it and live it, first person. Notice there's a place in your body where the feelings connected to that new movie start. Where they grow, where they spread from. What did you do? You generated a body feeling. Which is what? A vibrational field that is the cure for the negative harmonic. What do you do then? You wash it through the area. One of several things is going to happen. It's going to go away completely. Always a best thing, but sometimes you get two other effects. Sometimes you get what we call the Russian doll effect. You have an area that's this big, they breathe that resolution color through the area, it shrinks. It's not, that issue's gone. You hit another issue. They're just similar in some way, because that's how the unconscious mind works. It groups things by what they have in common. What color is this? What color, if your higher mind could send you a feeling, a frequency, a vibration that would completely dissolve XYZ color, what color might it send you? First impression. Oh, blue. Okay, breathe blue through that area and notice what happens. Shrinks again. What color is it now? Oh, it's black. Oh, if your higher mind could send you a feeling, a frequency, a vibration, a color that would completely dissolve that black part away, what would it be? Green. Go ahead and breathe, boom, it's gone. Layer by layer by layer. That's called the Russian doll effect. The other thing that happens is what we call body mapping. You have a big thing here, you color breathe it, it moves. Same idea. Related issue, but different issue. What color would dissolve this one? Oh, yellow. Okay, breathe it, it moves here. And now you just chase it through the body until it's completely gone. Those are the three things that are going to happen. Right? The secret goes back to your proprioceptive grid. Point to where you imagine reality, make it big as a drive-in movie theater screen. Crystal clear like an IMAX. Turn up the sound, the smells, the tastes, the feelings. Best life ever. What are we doing? It's called cortical activation. I'm lighting up every sensory cortex like a Christmas tree. Every time I do, I boost and multiply the amplitude running through the system. It's going to generate a body feeling. Once I have the body feeling, I have the cure. What the body creates, the body can change. You use a metaphor to dissolve a metaphor. That's color breathing. Okay, now we have 7 different levels to this. I'm giving you the basic ones, right? Did we get all the yes. So again, for those of you, dump it into the, are we trying to compensate for something? You guys have fun? You learn some cool shit? Thank you.
Dump them in there.
You know what's funny is the last 2 hypnothoughts I did this. Lady looked at me, she goes, I'm gonna win. I was like, okay. It was her name. 3 times. Right? Okay. Okay. By the way, all right. First one. Doc Bush, come on down. Big Doc. Congratulations. Take this out to Stephanie, let her know you won the raffle, and she will put your name on a list. You don't even know what you won, do you?
I do.
Oh, you okay? Good.
I got the bundle, right?
Oh, you got the bundle. Oh, you got it already?
No.
Oh, well, you got the bundle. Cool. All right, next one. All right. I'm taking bribes. All right, here. I feel like the great Karnak. Italian salami. How big is David's? Never mind. Okay. Becky Salustri, come on down.
I intended this to happen.
All right. There you go. Congratulations.
Maybe we'll sign him up too, so you get.
All right, go get him, Tiger. All right. So, when in doubt, frame it out. Right? Now, your assignment, should you decide to accept it, is to find anything with a pulse that will let you play. And just get rid of their shit. Line at Starbucks, person's complaining about a back pain, want to get rid of that? Let me tell you something I learned about how your nervous system works. Point to reveal it. Boom. Don't believe me. Just go do it. And secret to this. How many of you would like to be 31% better at everything? Anybody? Here's the secret. Be as playful as humanly possible. The science is there from a very easygoing, fun-loving discipline called hostage negotiation. When the hostage negotiator is more easygoing, fun-loving, playful, he's 30% or more adaptive, more resourceful, more perceptive. And his counterpart is up to 30% more compliant. Would anybody like to have more compliant patients? Even when you're dealing with the most heinous shit on the planet, if you come at this from, let's just see what happens, let's explore, let's do this together, you will be far more successful than if you get sucked into the miasma of their emotional whirlpool. Right? Like I said, I used to see patients 8, 9, 10 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. I've tested this shit all over the place. If you had a great time, please let everybody know. Right? If you didn't have a good time, talk about somebody else's training. I want to thank you all for coming, for showing your support. I love you all. By the way, the next training, I'll be announcing how many of you going to come into HypnoThoughts next year? I have a very special package with a very special discount just for ICBH people. So if you're interested, come into my next training. I'll see you. Good night.
Dr. David Snyder, ladies and gentlemen.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. You're very welcome.
You still have one this weekend, David?
Oh, yeah.